when I picked up the phone, I had gotten probably the worst news of my life.
Hello everyone, we have Lily Soliloquy here. I have had the opportunity to actually hear her story twice, her testimony. I just wanted to bring her on here and listen to her testimony again so you can hear it as well. Loly, can you share with us what your testimony is? How did you find Jesus?
How did I find Jesus? So a lot of you guys may or may not know, but I'm originally from Southern California. And when I was a new graduate nurse, I started working down there, actually in Los Angeles, Glendale Adventist Medical Center. And so right out of college, I was living on my own, thinking I could tackle the real world by myself. Wasn't really going to church, and kind of like by myself, actually away from my community that I was surrounded with growing up. And one day, I had just come home from a family gathering around the holidays when I got a message in the middle of the night, actually several phone calls. And when I picked up the phone, I had gotten probably the worst news of my life, that after the family party, my sister, my brother, my mother, my grandma, and my aunt had gotten into a car accident. And only my two sisters and my mother had survived the accident. So it's pretty tragic. And after all of those events, I decided to move home to take care of my family as they rehabbed and healed from that. And immediately the church community and my friends I had lost touch with surrounded us and actually helped me but it helped me heal through that whole grieving process. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the earliest moments that I was reconnected with my church. Mm-hmm. As I went through my early 20s and tried to heal from that tragic loss, I started getting close to my church community again. The young adults at the Loma Indonesian SDA Church really embraced me, and I eventually got involved with leadership, became the director of Vacation Bible School, and actually took the young adults on an international mission trip to Indonesia. And so things were going pretty well for a few years, and one of my close friends, few years later, that was also part of the church, he was suddenly diagnosed with testicular cancer. He was my age, and going through that journey together, I thought, why me, God? Why after all this pain that I've already experienced is now one of my best friends also going through this difficult battle? His name was Fahrenstein, and unfortunately he lost his battle to cancer in 2020. And so at that point in time, my faith started to struggle, I started to struggle with my faith a little bit. And with the pandemic, with the sudden loss, and just completing grad school all at the same time, I was kind of left with this opportunity to start fresh, move somewhere new where nobody knew me and where nobody knew my story, and I could just be this new person and start fresh. And so there came this opportunity to move to Palo Alto for a job. And I went back and forth with deciding whether or not to leave this community. But ultimately what helped me make that decision was having my sister that lives in San Francisco nearby, and also a close family friend who lived in Napa. And so I made the decision to move to Palo Alto, and this was in the fall of 2020. And I remember when my dad and my mom were helping me move into my new place, before they left, my dad left me with a piece of advice. And he said, Loly, you're in this new town, this new place where you don't know anybody. The number one thing I want you to focus and prioritize is finding a church. And he said, when you find a church, they're going to embrace you, they're going to take care of you. And so I really want you to look hard and to find a church. And so I didn't listen. I thought, I can just live my own life, and I don't need God. I don't need my parents' advice. I'm going to figure things out my own way. And so for a while, I wasn't going to church. It was also the middle of the pandemic, so churches weren't open. And I would do a little bit of online church here and there, but nothing consistently. And then later that year, I mentioned one of my family friends that lived in Napa that helped with the decision to move up here. She was also diagnosed with rectal cancer. And so it felt like time after time, the world was just against me. And it was really difficult to see God and find God in all these moments. Julie, my family friend, she also lost her battle to cancer. And so everything felt very hopeless at that point in time. While I was living in Palo Alto, I had some strange landlord drama. He had ripped up an entire wall in my apartment, and he was trying to install some sort of AC unit. But to cut, long story short, he didn't have the permits to do any of that. And so there was no end date to when all the construction would be done. And so I had to move out because it wasn't a safe, livable situation. I also have a dog that I live with, which makes finding an apartment a little bit more difficult. And so I had 2 weeks to find a place, and by the grace of God, I found an apartment, and it is only a walk away from the Mountain View SDA Church.
Wow.
And so before all of that, I had heard about the Mountain View Japanese church. Friends had said they have good potlucks, they have great young adults. And so I came in the middle of the pandemic when there was nobody here, there was no potlucks, there was no young adults. But for some reason, I just kept coming consistently. And it was when the deaconesses remembered my name and they greeted me in the front that I realized that, I might have a space here. There might be something here for me. And so I kept coming consistently. And then one day, I met some of the young adults. I met AJ. And if you meet AJ, then you get to meet everybody. And so it was kind of like the perfect way to meet the rest of the young adults. And I felt like I had a space here. And then fast forward, I became friends with the young adults. We started a run club. And I feel like if it weren't for the Mountain View Japanese SDA Church, my faith wouldn't be as strong as it is today. And so I think that God was able to use the Mountain View Church to help bring me back to Him.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And you've been a tremendous blessing to this church as well. And so we're thankful to have you. Now, I know there's a part of your story where tithing was pivotal to your faith journey. Can you elaborate on that? How did tithe play a role in your experience?
Yeah. So, growing up, we learned that as part of our stewardship, paying tithe and giving back 10% is, the least that God asks for us when He blesses us with an abundance. I did that for a little bit growing up, but as around the time when my faith was dwindling as well, and I wasn't really active in participating in church, I wasn't paying tithe as religiously or as faithfully as I used to. There were some times while I was living here in Palo Alto where money was a little bit tight, and the thought of giving 10%, which comes out to maybe a few $100s, having a few $100s left per month can actually make a big difference. And so as a part of meeting AJ, he invited me on one of the young adult ski retreats. And one of the speakers there was Calvin Kim, who you may or may not have heard of. And he talked about a lot of things, but what he left me with that was most impressive was that if you're struggling to have faith and trust in God, the easiest way to test Him is to practice giving tithe. And so after years of not doing this religiously, I thought, okay, if there's one thing that I can do, that I could start doing, it could be to start paying this tithe. regularly. And of course, it was hard in the beginning, but I committed to doing it. And after about 5 or 6 months of paying tithe, my work gave me a 12% pay raise, which I was shocked. And it was just a reminder that God is in control of everything, and He is the King of all things and the ultimate provider. And so if, our human minds, think 10% is a lot, but God has everything, and He's willing to give you everything and bless you with an abundance. And so that was just an affirmation of what I was doing. It was an affirmation that what I was doing was the right thing. And I think the money part was definitely the blessing, but the biggest blessing was, again, this church community that I had around me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lily, for joining us and for sharing your story. I know it's not an easy thing to be vulnerable and to express how all the personal things that have been going on in your life. But I truly believe that this is going to be a blessing for everyone that's going to be hearing this story. And I hope that you can come on again and share other parts of your story. But thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.